Hello out there, welcome, and thank you for joining us for an evening of poetry and conversation with Alison Rollins. We'd love to know where you're watching from, so please hop into the chat and let us know where you're coming in from. I want to again thank everyone for joining us. I'm Michael Wiegers, the executive editor at Copper Canyon Press, and I'm coming to you live from my home in Port Townsend, Washington, which is on Coast Salish Sklallam land. Tonight is a really vital fundraiser for Copper Canyon Press, so I want to start by acknowledging that we're indebted to our hardworking board of directors, whom I know are out there watching with us tonight. And on behalf of the press, as well as myself, I also want to express gratitude to all of our many donors who make everything we do possible. This includes not only individuals, but generous funders like the National Endowment for the Arts, the Hawthornden Foundation, For Culture, Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, and Lannan Foundation. To those of you who give to Copper Canyon Press, thank you. And if you're not already a donor to the press, now is a really critical time. We've recently seen some pretty severe cutbacks from some of our traditional funders, and now is when we really need your help. We're turning to you, the individuals who have sustained us over 50 years, and we know that many of you are going to sustain us for the next 50 years. You are the press's lifeblood. So you will be given many opportunities to make your gift in support of Black Bell, Alison Rollins, and the press this evening. You can make your gift by clicking on the links that will appear in our chat, or by using this QR code that appears on your screen. As many of you already know, Copper Canyon Press is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. Over those 5 decades, the press has been more than any single individual, more than any single poet, or any one editor or reader. This publishing house has existed in the belief in a plurality of voices, guided by their many imaginations and many ways of engaging the world around us, or what the poet Hayden Carruth called the voice that is great within us. Donors are a major part of that voice we are celebrating. Copper Canyon is a community, a family of poets, staff, board members, and donors, each essential to the success of our last 50 years. If you're a past donor, I hope you share in a deep sense of gratification and accomplishment for all the books we have published together, especially here upon our 50th anniversary. You have shown that you believe in this shared vision of the role poetry can play in individual lives. When you become a donor to Copper Canyon, you're joining a community of visionaries committed to a world where poetry not only thrives, but helps shape what humanity might be. That community is made physical in the books we publish. Before our guest, Alison Rollins, reads, I want to go over a few quick logistics to make sure we're all comfortable in this shared virtual space. If it would help you to see closed captioning, you can enable captions at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will be live streaming this reading simultaneously to Facebook, and the event will be recorded and shared on our website. You can send a note of encouragement to tonight's readers, or just say hello by clicking on the chat icon down at the bottom of your screen. We'd love to hear from you. I also want to invite you at any time during the evening to drop a note into the chat, perhaps when a line or a phrase or an image from a poem really finds its place in you. Let us know. I want to take a moment to thank our team behind the scene, running tech and logistics tonight. We've all become very accustomed to online events like this and may not realize that there are loads of people behind the scenes making everything work. I want to express my personal gratitude to my colleagues for their care and good work in making this all possible. As I mentioned before, we are a community of many voices, intellects, and imaginations. And as I pivot to our guest, Alison Rollins, I want to first introduce my colleague, Ashley Wynter, who has been instrumental to the editing and envisioning of this book. Ash has been with Copper Canyon Press for a little over a year and has immediately shown herself to be a skilled editor, a terrific advocate of our poets, and a good friend. It's been a tremendous joy to work alongside her on this book. I'm going to hand the mic over to her now so she can continue into our evening's program. Ash?
Thank you for kicking us off, Michael, and thank you for taking the time to introduce me. Hello to everyone out there from Minneapolis. I'm so grateful to have joined a press with such an extraordinary vision and passion for poetry. And it has been an amazing and continued experience to edit the work of brilliant minds and distinct voices like Alison's. Alison C. Rollins is the author of Black Bell and Library of Small Catastrophes, a recipient of fellowships with Cave Canem, Callaloo, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Poetry Foundation. Rollins was awarded support from the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study at Harvard University, the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, and Brown University's Artist Grant. She has held faculty and librarian appointments at institutions including the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, Colorado College, and Pacific Northwest College of Art. She's an assistant professor of English at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I'm so excited to introduce Alison's upcoming collection, Black Bell, which was inspired by the 19th century image of an enslaved woman wearing iron horns and bells. The collection continues Rollins' exploration of cataloging individual experience and collective memory, and sets out to resuscitate and embody the archive. In Black Bell, we see a chorus of historical figures like Eliza Harris and Henry Box Brown. Readers can listen in as Phyllis Wheatley takes a Turing test or ride shotgun through the afterlife in T.S. Eliot's Chevrolet Impala. In each poem, Black Bell vibrates with fugitive frequencies, survival sounds, and nerve-wracking notes tuned toward liberation, often finding escape in love and the limitness of one's own imagination. Integrating sonics, metalwork, and performance art practices, language becomes performance, and Black Bell becomes a multimedia meditation on freedom seeking. And on that note, I'll leave it to Alison to start us off with a few poems. Alison?
Thank you so much. I am delighted to see folks from all over in the chat, from Queens to Seattle to Iowa City to South Korea, shout out Houston, Canada, etc. I am reporting to you from Arlington, Massachusetts, the New England area, and I thought I would start off with a poem that is in relationship to the original title I had for the book, which was Quartet for the End of Time, and a source of deep inspiration for the manuscript. And so that title actually comes from a piece of chamber music that was written by the French composer Olivier Messiaen when he was imprisoned in a prison camp in Germany during World War II. And what I'm so moved by in terms of this piece of composition is not only the beauty of the music, but Messiaen's decision to act in a type of creative impulse, to be guided by creativity in the midst of being imprisoned. And the performance of the piece is done by a quartet of other men that were imprisoned in the camp, and they perform for the prison guards and the other imprisoned men there on this site that's kind of desolate, off the grid, a quote unquote kind of uncivilized or wild area. And Messiaen's love for spirituality, his love for ornithology or the study of birds and bird songs really influences the piece. My own relationship to Catholicism and to also birds is something that comes up a lot in the manuscript. And so I thought I would start with this piece called Quartet for the End of Time. 1. If you play me, then you play yourself. That was all the dead needed to say. To get the better of time, we got better with time. I left my body and took on the look of a man. I made him an honest woman. A diagram of this sentence builds a structure made from wind. Inside that house is a box. Inside the box is the head of a goat. Inside the goat, a knife's quiet song. The blade of desire is the silver in my teeth. My mouth has a certain ring to it. 2. I will take you now, to afterlife's kitchen, where the salty girls cure meat with their tears. Only through time is time conquered. Come correct. Come prepared to sit at the table of contents. We bow our heads, count our blessings like little pigs, while the kingfisher waits for a shaft of sun. Sprint, said the bird, for the foothills of truth. Stop, 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 said the bird. There is mischief afoot. Then we sat and ate with our hands an entire field of wild thyme. When asked to choose a hill to die on, we wanted to kill the bird. To reconcile our pain, we made the stars into a bear. Myth made all the difference. 3. If your wrist holds a 5-nailed star, clock the T. Who can open the door tonight and not see themselves in black? Not I. For thousands of years, I have sat on a milk crate. Stationed at the crossroads, I sing, bone, 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 bone. I don a yellow jacket and foxgloves to push out the sun. The morning is such a production. A ghost, aghast at the sound of singe, a crown knot of fire. There is no sense to be had in the country of our making. This language, a garden of strain. No limit soldiers, we marched to the drum of empty cups, and if a spoon fell, a woman was cursed. 4. When I was sold down the river, God set down his book in the shape of a tent. That day, I was born again. My limbs, American letters. The stairway to heaven is yellow-boned legs, antiqued in their quadroon rust. At the gate to eternity, a lawn jockey grins wide as the science of mercy. In his hands, a badminton racket. He swats and we see how they run, how crickets gallop in the dark like horseflies. Heaven is 1,000 chandeliers, every crystal a single body, each head a grisly sparkle. So that's the first piece. I wanted to return, if we could, again to the image that was just shown, that's also where the manuscript now has its title, the official title of A Black Bell, and what served as inspiration for a series of 4 poems that appear in the manuscript. And this was an image that I discovered when I was doing research on fugitivity, so enslaved Black persons that attempted to escape and to run away to sometimes form maroon societies, the self-sufficient societies that free peoples formed living kind of in the wilderness or in community with nature. And I was so struck by this particular image because of the beauty of the placement of the body, I think, in it. I think it's a site of terror, but also a site of grace and elegance. And I've been doing research. I'm on fellowship right now at Harvard, and I've been doing research in their special collections on 19th and 18th century dance books that talk about the movement or the gestures of the body in relationship to music, and how this posture I would like to see through a lens of kind of dance, performance, and choreography. And so there's 4 poems in the book called Black Bell that are written in relationship to the tuning of a bell to a particular chakra of the body. So I thought I would read a few of them throughout the course of the evening. And this is one that's tuned to the chakra of the heart, which is the note F. So this is called Black Bell. Sound can give things a color, the way eyes can smile. To give yourself back to yourself, you must increasingly fold inward at the etched creases of your palms. To turn black is to join the fold. To turn back is to face the music of the shotgun's open mouth. We watch to see how Black Bell's holding up by a thread, a string, a hook, a rope. She sleeps a sleep of the sleepless. A bell's body is never at rest. Okay, so in addition to the Black Bell series, there's two poems that take the shape of an actual bell in terms of how they sit on the page. One of them is called A Bell as a Messenger of Time, and one is called A Bell as a Bearer of Time. And in this collection overall, I'm thinking a lot about the page as a stage, a site of performance in terms of language, in terms of how language sits on the page visually, in terms of, I'm really trying with this collection to create more pockets of inviting readers to be in collaboration with me in meaning making in the ways that they engage with the book. So there's opportunities to cut up poems, there's instructions for how to kind of perform or to activate poems in relationship to others. And so it's really thinking about the collection as an invitation, as a maybe guidebook, a loose guidebook that invites readers to really have their own relationship to the book as a physical object, but also to meaning making in the poetry and language on the page. So I'm really, really delighted and excited to be able to engage with readers, hopefully in like live reading settings, but also in passively in terms of ways people will experiment and continue to play with the book, maybe in ways I hadn't even imagined. So I'll read this poem and then maybe we'll turn to a few questions. So it's called A Bell as a Messenger of Time. And it has these instructions to be performed with bells on. All reading is performance. Some performance is reading. The next heavy load is lightheaded. The single sound everywhere at once. Black bell, have you any cool? May all enemies be this ridiculous. You put a face to the name of my noise, the sum of a shadow, invisible to whom? Can't you hear me coming? A pyramid of bells singing from between my ears. That's why when you speak of me, my ears ring with the melody of 1,000 tambourines. To get ahead of myself, I got freedom off my chest. I'm a woman in the company of bells. Am I their company? Are they mine? No one seems to have a handle on the hex, aside from the tattletale town crier. You looked at me the wrong way. I was moved, surrounded on all sides by bells, barnacle bells, irremovable attachments. Even when I ghost you, you still hear me fixing to arrive, a jingle of labor from on high. The sound takes a toll on the body. The crops respond well to sound waves. You hear the river before you see it. Ever-present eavesdropper, a bell is a messenger of time. Don't kill the messenger, make a killing with the message. Forgive me not, the bells run interference, ring and remove, the bells placed head over heels, the mind left in the dark, in the thicket, where all the clocks have stopped. When all the clocks stopped, I laid my burden down, hearing the last sense to escape the body.
Alison, thank you so much for that powerful reading and start to the evening. I was deep in it. I almost forgot I had to hop back on. So, but I'm here. And I wanted to talk a bit about you. You mentioned a lot about your desire to kind of bridge the gap between reading and performance and vice versa, and the multimedia nature of the work. But you've also gone a little bit beyond that, right? You have physically created the iron horn and bells. And I was hoping you could talk to us a bit about that journey into metalwork, and if you found any parallels between writing poetry and creating with your hands. So I think we'll start there.
Yeah, I think for me, when I think about creative process or I think about poetry, I think about one nail, like having one nail. And if I just have one nail, I can hang my coat on that. And by my coat, I mean my imagination. And so for me, for this project, that archival image became that one nail. And I, from that, kind of created a constellation of curiosity that I'm still chasing. So some of that was poetry, which will become a book, which people understand as a poetry book. Some of that was like, I really want to know what it means to make with my hands this particular structure, what is referred to as a device in the slave narrative it comes from of Moses Roper. And so at the time I was living in Providence, Rhode Island, and I had a friend who was able to connect me with someone at the Providence Steel Yard. And they run a variety of different classes in ceramics, welding, metalwork, blacksmithing, jewelry making. And so for me, it was a way to kind of even get out of my own head as it relates to my own expectations about creative process, and to be with makers. Like there was a gentleman in the class with me who was making structures to hold firewood. There was someone in the class who was an expert woodworker and was trying to learn more about welding to accompany his wood making. And so I was kind of the weird avant-garde poet who was there to try to recreate this like 19th century structure for no purpose other than to make it and to perform with it on, to make a kind of sculptural art object or piece. And I found, in terms of not only my creative work, but in terms of my living, I'm always interested in getting outside of my comfort zone and being with folks where I'm not the expert, where I'm often at a loss for how to do the thing, and starting from square one. And so for me, there was just something really interesting about animating using a union trade type of labor, which I think we often really disregard or don't have a high enough appreciation for people that are union laborers or using other types of skilled labor processes. And so for me, it was just really incredible to be in that space and to be making and to be dealing with a large scale object as opposed to like printers, my computer, paper. So I made the structure, I recreated it, and I've been performing with it and using it as kind of a sound installation alongside the poem. So yes, visual art, sculpting became a new component of my process with this project.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I mean, you talk about performing with it on, and in many ways, I think you are physically embodying the past, and you're working in archives, you are physically projecting the past onto your body. And I think I've talked a lot about, I've talked a lot with other authors in this season, and Nikki heard the stuff of Hollywood about working in the archive and entering those spaces, those collective memories and histories. And we talked a lot about sometimes that being a heavy lift. Is there anything that you're doing for self-care as you're working in the past, as you're working in these moments, or do you find the need for that? Be quite interested in that.
Yeah, I think it's important to, again, as living beings, I think we're all in our everyday survival having to rely on certain types of creativity and ingenuity. And I think that requires respite. I think that requires an attention to restoration. For me, if I'm led by curiosity, if I'm led by wonder, I think it alleviates some of the trauma or some of the heaviness of what it means to re-enter the past, or what it means to dwell on things that have real implications for my body as a Black person, as a Black woman, as a queer person in the United States. So I'm a firm believer in totems and having, whether that's a ginger tea some days, whether that's a bath, whether that's extra nap time, whether that's engaging with community members and those that I love, and kind of creating, I guess, little shrines. I'm a librarian. My husband would probably like to think of it more so as a hoarder. So I collect and have a lot of items in my home, things that bring me a sense of joy or peace to look at visually. So it ends up being a lot of various items, but I love filling my home with original art by people that make me feel seen, that make me feel affirmed. I love supporting local artistry. I love music. I love, yeah, a wide variety of things. I think just making home a peaceful space and a space to recharge, and being gentle with my body. I made a little charcuterie today that brought me joy. I make adult Lunchables that brings me joy. So yeah, just the little things to create peace.
Yeah, thank you. I'm thinking now how I might need to end my evening with an adult Lunchables. That sounds lovely. But I think we have time for one more question in this section, and I just wanted to bring up a bell hooks quotation that is in the collection, and you talk about the moment we choose to love, we begin to move towards freedom, to act in ways that liberate ourselves and others. And I wanted to see there are so many themes and forces at play in this collection, but I thought it was important to talk about how you might view love. Do you view love as a form of agency, a communal act of resilience?
Yeah, I think I was playing around with a chart or a grid for the book and how I could conceive of it in that plane or dimension. And so like time is a certain axis, space is a certain axis in the book. And then love and liberation are 2 points that are very key or core, maybe running through the 0 mark of the book. I think that while some could interpret the book as having a particular historical weight, I really want to center, though, love as process in my work and love as an extension to readers, that I am hopefully creating pockets of grace and opportunity and portals to invite readers into my work in a way where they can play, where they can experiment, where they can self-reflect in ways where I'm not necessarily in control. And I think that the magic of language, the invitation of language and poetry specifically, is a freedom space, is a freedom ground. And so for me, that's a more generous act with my work in this book. I think a more conscious act. And so I think at its center, love is liberatory. Love is a form of listening, and love is a form of holding attention, a desire, I think, to be seen and heard. And so I wonder what that could look like in terms of all its possibility on the page, especially in the form of poetry, and in form of my own relationship with myself, my work, my process, with hopefully the future readers of this book. So while it sounds quite cliche, I think love is one of the most complex, nuanced, difficult, and sometimes even violence-twinged experiences of what it means to be human. And so no clear answers, but it's certainly hopefully at work in the book.
Yeah, I think I can say it's certainly at work in the book. And I want to thank you for talking about your resilience, the resilience that's present in the collection, and the love, which is just one of the many powerful themes moving through the work. Each time I hear you talk about Black Bell, I am truly struck by the multifaceted nature of the work, how it reaches across different media and mediums, archives, images, poetry, metalwork, sound. Black Bell is truly expanding the possibilities of poetry and how it can exist beyond the page. This level of innovation comes with increased production costs, and we would like to ask you, our viewers, supporters, and fellow champions of poetry to become collaborators in this extraordinary process and help bring Alison's creative vision to life. You can donate through a link in our chat or scan the QR code on your screen, and do so knowing that your gift will help keep Black Bell accessible and get into the hands of as many people as possible. For your gift of $100, you will receive a first edition copy of Black Bell. For your gift of $125, you can have your name printed in a special acknowledgement section of the book. A heartfelt thank you to those who have already made your gift this evening. If you have not already donated and would like to, please consider taking the time to do so now. Alison, I'll turn the mic back over to you. I'm sure we'd all love to hear some more poetry.
Great, thank you. So I'll start this segment. I got a question in the Q&A from Elle. What up, Elle? They were asking in relationship to my welding, like how long it took me to make the bell structure or sculpture, and how did the process of making that, in addition to the archival research, shape or reshape my writing and revision process. So I thought this was a good question to start off the next section. So to make the welded sculpture, I did that over the course of, I guess, 2 weekend sessions. So I'm not sure exactly how much total time. I'm not very good at welding. The structure is not very well made. You don't want me building your airplanes or anything that needs to actually be functional in terms of structure. But I'd say over the course of 2 weekends. And I love this question about connecting it to revision, because something for this collection, as I sit with like the copy edits, and I really love printing out my copy edits for the process and having all the red marks and the paper in my hands and showing to my students, like, look at all the copy edits your professor had to make. And so what was really cool for me about welding is when I was cutting steel or I'm putting together 2 pieces of metal, it's a dangerous process. I need to have on eye protection. I need to have on a mask over my head. I have clothing that covers my skin. It's high temperatures. There are things that can literally go wrong and be devastating or harmful to the body, to others. And so it was that level of attention and detail when I entered the space of the steel yard that I've been thinking a lot about in terms of entering a creative writing classroom or entering my workspace when I sit down to write. Like, what is at stake? Or what am I doing to arm myself or prepare myself in creative process that might be similar or dissimilar from if I'm entering a maker space, like an actual maker space? I also think a lot about line breaks, how easy it is to hit enter on my computer. I just press one button, the next line starts, or if I want to create a line break. Whereas when I'm working with steel, it requires very heavy, serious equipment to be able to cut through steel, or to be able to kind of, you could think of it as just gluing 2 pieces of steel together and welding. So the ease with which I can command language, with which I can type, create space, create new page breaks, create a new page, erase, they're so simple. And so the experience of dealing with the complications of that was really eye-opening for me. And another thing was when I would do my steel work, it's very hot, so you have to let it cool. It's very large, so I have a little Chevy Spark. I have a very tiny car, so it was barely fitting inside my vehicle. So thinking about how I could transport it or store it. Whereas when I print out the manuscript, I can kind of throw this in my bag and keep it moving. So I've been thinking a lot, and this is an interesting question for folks that are writers that are in this event. Like, what is the scope of your work? Not literally, but like, what is the scale or magnitude of your work? If you had to give it dimensions, what size is it actually? And that's something I've been thinking a lot about in relationship to the metalwork. So thank you for that question. All right, let's see. Poems. All right, I'll read this one. I saw this, I think, on Twitter before it became what it is now. It was just a news title for an article in the UK. It was called "Climate Crisis Could Kill Off Great Tits, Scientists Warn." So this is again in connection to birds, climate change, environmental concerns. Climate crisis could kill off great tits, scientists warn. The birds got over on us, which made our stomachs turn, so bent on becoming snakes. To make ends meet, God said, "Come as you are," which meant tit for tat. Once in a while, the water learns from our mistakes. Lopsided harbinger of sag, it was not the pitter-patter heart, but the skitter-scatter rhythm of survival. The tits teeter, seesaw back and forth on the brink of extinction. Honeysuckle knows hunger is more commonplace when housed in a garden of change. You, tater-tot hummingbird, could be gone in the blink of a mouth. Bite size is how God sees you. Those small minds make great expectations. To warn is to predict the future, to rid the foreskin of foresight. Let's read another one. In some ways, this book is also a love song to St. Louis. There's a poem for Dred Scott in the collection. There's a poem called St. Louis Blues based on the W.C. Handy song. And I'm always thinking, maybe sometimes in the back of my mind, due to my early schooling, about T.S. Eliot. And so this poem is called Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. There's various kind of futurity-based poems that imagine traveling through the afterlife in a kind of cosmic spacesuit or in a spaceship, thinking or imagining being with the ancestors or those that are dead, but resurrecting them or bringing them back to life. And so this piece is called Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. Because I could not stop for death, I creep. In a subjunctive mood, I traveled back to the future, to the place where I hold out for a sound. At present, I ride shotgun, Elliot at the wheel of an Impala with suicide doors. Immortality kicks the back of my seat. She rolls down her window even though the air is on. We pause at Sonia's house, the one on the end with lions. All the ghosts in her garden have a heart, the bees extinct, and the Negroes high yellow in pollen. 'Twas mercy brought me from pagan poppies. 'Twas love that drove me towards this climax of laden light. I look away from the pistol of war's flowered head. There were birds where questions should have been, in this world with no use for gender. T.S. rolls slow with a gangsta lean. He points ahead, calls my hometown the wasteland. He kisses my head, and dust names me its daughter. Let's see. Now living in New England for the year, but before that I was in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And in addition to the literal archive, or what we think of as archives in terms of a collection of materials or a library or like a basement or something, I also really like to think about landscape, the natural land, as an archive, thinking about collaborating with nature, with the natural world as a site of memory, as a site of historical kind of reference, as a site of preservation. And so there is a beautiful sandstone formation in Colorado Springs called Garden of the Gods. And so this piece is in relationship to that. I prefer living by water to mountains technically, and I prefer flatlands, but I do sometimes really miss looking out on that landscape in the Southwest. Garden of the Gods. As a matter of black, I will trade a mountain for a river. What does that tell you about my makeup? I once met a cowboy. I said, "Let me hold your body. You know I'm good for it." He gave his consent. I wore him out. On paper thin sheets, I scissored a woman, her expression hard as a rock. She, a cliff dweller, a figurehead alien to my bizarre beauty. I, a queer mare, a stallion in the hands of an angry god. To be human is to be homeless, the furthest removed from grandeur. I've met my makers in flower beds of milkweed. No birds of paradise were there, only crows, dark as echoes, juniper trees alive with want. Coyotes aroused by the sound of cold glass. Between me and the world is a wind section of awe. Inside me, a desert of thistle. I've had enough of the belief in numberless fish, in something other than longhorn skulls. Next to the vermilion spires, I feel small, my nature second to none. Watch the gods scurry like daddy long legs, moved by a higher power. Okay, so maybe I'll read one more Black Belt poem and then we'll hear again from folks. This one is designed to be read along with a bell that's tuned to the note of A, which is connected to the third eye chakra. Black Bell. Were the whistles of men down her back. Her clapper hung like a saggy breast, a piece of music. Beneath her skirt was the truth made ugly, unsweet as blackberry thorns. Her laughter's rattle, a mass for secret contempt. She took in as much as she could, a homely or rather timely air about her. Inside the wall of her cheek was a sliver of violence only she could trust. The wind would witness, but wouldn't chime in.
Thank you, Allison. I've got a couple of questions for you, and I want to go back to, several years ago when I first called you to say that I wanted to publish a library of small catastrophes. We almost immediately started talking about visual art and about our shared hometown of St. Louis. So tonight you've talked a little bit about archiving and hoarding in your personal life. And I'm wondering whether you consider writing itself to be an act of archiving or an act of hoarding literary ancestry. Who are the influences you've hoarded, both visual and literary?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, A, way too many to name. B, I don't know if this brings readers as much delight as it brings me as the writer to do the notes section for my poetry books, but and even the notes is probably 50% of all of the names I would love to have in the book itself. I think that I'm always like quilting or in conversation with people across space and time. Like my work really is a constellation. And so there's so many historical figures, so many musical figures. I just like the idea of like sitting Dante's Inferno next to Beyonce, sitting, Bone Thugs and Harmony next to I have an 18th century Russian father of kind of Russian cosmism and librarianship. So I think those juxtapositions are really, really interesting to me and often how my mind works. I think St. Louis is also just such a historical location for me. Like I know we talked about the art museum and going to the art museum and having the history museum, these sites be free. And as a little Black girl, like roaming around in these spaces, including also the St. Louis Cathedral Basilica. So I went to Catholic school for kindergarten through 12th grade. So I would have on my little uniform, be in this basilica with beautiful mosaics, beautiful ornate structures just sitting there. I remember on the left side of the church is the apostles in like the fire and having these beautiful visual iconographies surrounding the spiritual experience for me. So art, history were very much seeped into my childhood, into my worldview, into my concept of making. Yeah, I'm sorry, I got really excited by what you said. Did that answer the question, Michael? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
I was wondering also, just some of the hoarding and archiving that you do within your work.
Oh, within.
And so I think that answers it in large part. By the way, my mom and dad got married in that cathedral. So anyway, over the past couple of decades, I've also noticed that we've been seeing more, poetic work and work that as one of our audience members, Eric Wilson, notes,
Mhm.
really is drawing upon visuals, upon photography, around engravings, etc. And I'm wondering whether in the age of social media, you consider visual imagery to be increasingly a necessary component of writing, of how we communicate, or is this, do you think that an interaction with visual imagery is going to be an ongoing component of your writing, or is this just, one in-depth project that you see?
Yeah, I'm really curious. I see Eric's question or comment. I was scrolling through Twitter land today in a state of somewhat despair, but also I find interesting things there as well. And there was a conversation surrounding when someone says the word apple, what is the mental picture that you draw upon? And eventually it became a discussion of kind of I feel like the term is fantasia. There's a type of like cognitive processing in which when someone says apple, you don't actually see a mental picture or image of an apple or anything. It's actually blank. So that word is referencing an idea or concept, but not a mental image. And so I really think about that a lot in terms of metaphor. Like, what is the intention or power behind metaphor, imagery, and work, especially as it relates to poetry? And so, yes, while this collection has archival images in it, and a lot of the inspiration for the pieces are coming from a relationship to illustrations or archival images that exist, I don't really think the concept of visuals in that way is trendy or a thing to be, I don't know. I'm not really also a techie, so social media is not really my jam. I'm in like special collections with the archivist kicking it. So I don't really have, I wouldn't be the person to be going hard for like visual images as some new contemporary thing. But I think we like or have a connection to like storytelling that has powerful imagery or has powerful moments that people can remember. I think there's something humanly attractive to that or that we're drawn to. And so I'm much more interested probably in all of the ways to kind of explore or engage with metaphor or explore or engage with image in the mind. Or when we see words, what do we see? So like there's even poems in the book that don't have images, but the ways in which the words are constructed on the page are generating an image, or they're adjacent to or leaning to imagery in a new way. Or they're asking you as a reader to determine your eye maybe isn't going to move from left to right. Maybe you're jumping out of the margin, you're turning to a different page, you're moving down the page and coming up, you're returning to things. So it's asking also, I think, for new kind of choose your own adventure discourses as it relates to reading or the proper way or traditional way to read. And so these are all things I'm trying to explore in the book, hopefully in more, I guess, experimental or playful ways. Not as a move to be trendy or to hop on whatever as it relates like visuals, I guess, but to think more about metaphor.
Yeah, because I see your work as looking both forward and backwards. I don't know if you had a chance to see the Lauren Halsey exhibit at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where she created a whole sculpture atop the museum that was based on kind of Egyptian statues, but it was dealing with looking backwards, but also, in an Afrofuturistic way. And I was wondering maybe if you could talk a little bit about that in the book, the Turing Machine poem that you've done, where you're kind of looking at an early form of artificial intelligence while simultaneously going back to the legacy of Phyllis Wheatley. And could you maybe, tell us a little bit about that poem and what you were doing there?
Sure, yeah. So Alan Turing developed this particular test to determine if human beings could tell whether they were engaging with a form of artificial intelligence in the form of a computer or a computing system, or they were engaging with a human being. So you would ask a series of questions, and you would kind of be testing to figure out whether you're engaging with or communicating with a human or a form of like synthetic intelligence. Famously, this is in the movie Blade Runner for 80s sci-fi fans with Harrison Ford. And so this test was really interesting to me to apply to Phyllis Wheatley, the first African-American, or she came as an enslaved woman on the ship Phyllis, and came to actually Boston at the port and published a collection of poetry. And so at the beginning of that book, like so many other also slave narratives or other narratives from Black people, there's a variety of different white men that are co-signing that she in fact wrote the poems, that she is in fact the person who originally wrote this text. And so I use the Turing test as a more contemporary kind of technologically based example to explore how one measures or determines originality, who has the potential to be creative, how we evaluate or think about Black women writers as it relates to poetry as a fine or high art. And so that's another one of those examples of juxtapositions in the book where I'm really toying with or conflating or like collapsing space in terms of the discourse. I didn't want the book to be read entirely in any kind of way, or one could say it's an entirely historical piece based on the archive. I wanted it to kind of collapse or think about technology in ways that felt really fresh or at least pertinent to me. So yeah.
Well, I'm going to ask you to read another poem here in a second before we have to close out. But I also just want a quick shout out, going back to something you said about a nail to hang your idea on, and I don't know whether or not you realized you were referencing Robert Oppenheimer, who was brought to close or a hat rack. He said, no, I just want a nail to put my hat on. And there's a great artist collective called Future Farmers that you'll love. And they've written a book called For Want of a Nail that I would recommend to everyone, but we'll talk about that offline. I'm sorry.
See, why I'm not familiar with those two examples, and while you're saying that, I'm thinking of like Nas, all I need is one mic. So like for what? Yes, we'll
talk. But I mean, this is what I so much love about working with you is we're all, and I think Ash will share this as well. We just learned so much from you, and are so grateful for all the wisdom that you bring to our organization, and you're making us better. So before we end with a final poem from Alison, I'd like to invite everyone again to support our campaign for her book, Black Bell. And if you haven't already done so, I hope you'll consider doing so. It's a collection, as we've indicated, that celebrates community and collaboration. And your gift tonight will not only support Alison and Black Bell, but it's also going to help 10 other incredible collections we have forthcoming in the spring of 2024. I think that's been something that's been very important to Alison, to really be a part of building the community of Copper Canyon Press and seeing us into our next 50 years and into the future. So if you've loved hearing Alison read and perform her poems tonight, and share in all the brilliant insights she's brought to us, as much as I did, your gift of 500 or more, if you can swing it, you're invited to a private Zoom reading and Q&A session with Alison, where you can hear more of her innovative poetry and ask your questions and have just an extraordinary evening with her. To secure your spot for that exclusive reading or choose from other exciting poetry rewards, you can scan the QR code on the screen in front of you, or click on the link provided in our chat. So again, thank you to everyone out there for making poetry in collaboration with us and with Alison. And thank you, as always, for your generous support. And Alison, please, another poem, if you will.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you to all of you sharing space with me virtually. You had a choice to be anywhere else, but to choose poetry, to choose to listen to my words and to engage with me, I greatly appreciate it, and I'm humbled. I thought I would end with this poem called Letter from the End of the World, which I wrote in quarantine in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And in a space of longing for connection, I think for certain foods, as you'll see in the poem, but also a space to think more about what it means to be lonely versus alone, and to think about letters to the self and letters in relationship to time. Letter from the end of the world. The reason no longer matters. The why, the how, irrelevant. The politicians, the smooth of my love's bald head, him saying, it's okay to be sad. The point is, I miss crab legs, fried chicken, and French fries. I sat in my house for days. All I wanted was to go home. At first, the mountains seemed to bid me good riddance, the trees tired of everything I represent. But I learned to study the stars, to tuck my chin when I jump from high places. I learned the sun does not owe me a single thing, that I am what I take for granted. The point is, I wasn't right to begin with. Race, a product of a sick imagination. I started out as a girl, without a shadow of a doubt, my opposable thumbs at the ready. At the end of the world, I was bananas, a woman with a mouth full of golds. If you don't like this ending, implore the children to make up one of their own. Thank you.
Alison, what a beautiful place to end the evening. Thank you for nerding out with us. Thank you for sharing your work with us, for expanding our minds. Thank you to my co-host, Michael, and to everyone in the audience. As Alison said, it's been so wonderful to share space with you all. And thank you for choosing to be here and to be a part of poetry. If you haven't already had a chance to make your donation to Copper Canyon Press in celebration of Black Bell and in celebration of the brilliant mind before us, in celebration of Alison, there's the link in the chat again, and we'll share a QR code on the screen as well. Thank you so much for sharing your evening with us, and everyone, please have a wonderful night.